On June 11, 1948, a truce is declared. Jews and Arabs lay down their arms for 4 weeks. For the Jews, the respite is shattered by internal divisions. The very day the truce goes into effect, a ship organized by the Irgun, the underground organization led by Menachem Begin, heads for Israel from Europe. Named the Altalena, it carries immigrants and a large amount of weapons. Although an agreement had been reached between Begin and Ben-Gurion's representatives regarding the allocation of arms, Ben-Gurion, without evidence, claims the ship is part of a putsch by Begin. He orders the ship destroyed, and on June 22nd it is sunk off the coast of Tel Aviv. Days later, Ben-Gurion faces a mutiny within his general staff. Several, including Chief of Operations Yigal Yadin, resign over Ben-Gurion's plan to replace senior officers who are members of Mapam, a rival party to his own Mapai, with veterans from the British Army. When a committee assigned to look into the matter sides with the generals, Ben-Gurion too resigns. This leads to a bizarre situation, where Israel has neither a head of government nor a head of the army at a time when the end of the truce is fast approaching. On July 7th, the cabinet prevails on Ben-Gurion to return. Yadin also reassumes his post. Biographer of Ben-Gurion Michael Bar Zohar writes,
Ben-Gurion's victory was the end of the mutinies in the army. From this point onward, he was to receive a free hand in running defense matters.
Despite the internal upheavals, a Western embargo on arms, and the loss of weapons from the Altalena, Israel's army is transformed over the 4-week truce. Weapons arrive, including Messerschmitt fighters from Czechoslovakia. Yadin said,
"At the termination of the first truce, we took the initiative into our own hands. And after that, we never allowed it to return to the Arab forces."
Fighting resumes on Friday, July 9th. In the north, Israel launches Operation Barosh, or Cypress Tree, against the Syrian army. When the UN imposes a second truce 10 days later, Israel and Syria, despite intense fighting, are roughly in the same position as when they started. Another Israeli offensive in the north, Operation Dekel, or Palm Tree, is more successful. Israeli forces seize Nazareth and surrounding areas from the Arab Liberation Army led by Fawzi al-Qaukji. However, Qaukji continues to hold on to a major enclave in northern Galilee. In the south, Israel seeks to open the road to the Negev, where Jewish settlements remain cut off. In the ensuing battles with Egypt, Israel manages to open a narrow, tenuous corridor to the Negev. Israel's major offensive is in the Jerusalem corridor against her most powerful enemy, the Arab Legion. Israel launches Operation Dani, the goal to open the road to Jerusalem. The IDF carries out the first phase of the plan successfully, capturing the towns of Ramla and Lod with its airport, today Israel's Ben Gurion International Airport. The second phase of the plan is to capture Ramallah and Latrun, thereby finally opening the main road to Jerusalem. But before this can be done, the UN applies pressure for another truce. Chaim Herzog writes in The Arab-Israeli Wars,
"As was to occur on many occasions, when it appeared that the Jewish forces were hard-pressed, the United Nations organization dragged its feet. But when it appeared that the Israelis were gaining the upper hand, the entire machinery of the community of nations was galvanized into action to prevent the Israelis from exploiting their success."
The second truce, starting on July 18th, clearly benefits the Arabs. Swedish Count Folke Bernadotte, the UN's peace emissary, now pushes his plan. It would take the Negev from Israel, give Ramleh and Lod back to the Arabs, and place Jerusalem under UN control. The underground group Lehi assassinates him on September 17. Although Lehi hoped to bury the plan, the assassination of Bernadotte only raises the status of his recommendations. Herzog writes,
The Israeli government realized that as long as the Negev was cut off from the center of Israel, it would be impossible to fight these political proposals.
The Israelis plan an offensive known as Operation 10 Plagues. The Egyptians give Israel an opening when, on October 15th, they attack an Israeli supply convoy, violating the truce right under UN noses. Michael Bar Zohar writes,
Operation 10 Plagues included the bitterest and fiercest battles of the War of Independence, marked by hand-to-hand combat with firearms, knives, fists, and teeth.
On October 19th, the Security Council calls for an immediate ceasefire. Ben-Gurion delays his response to gain another day or two, and the road to the Negev is finally opened on October 20th. Beersheba, the capital of the Negev, falls to Israeli forces the next day. Ben-Gurion now turns his attention to the north to destroy Kaukji's Arab Army of Liberation. It takes only 60 hours to clear the whole of central Galilee and eliminate Kaukji's army. Political pressure led by Great Britain mounts in the UN to force Israel to withdraw to the lines of October 14th, cutting off the Negev once again. Ben-Gurion orders Operation Chorev, the last major offensive of the war. From December 22, 1948 to January 8, 1949, Israeli forces penetrate the Sinai and come within a stone's throw of El Arish. By December 27th, the Egyptian Eastern Front has collapsed. Egypt is saved when the United States ambassador to Israel on January 1, 1949, delivers an ultimatum to Ben-Gurion from the British government. Unless Israel withdraws from the Sinai, the British will be obliged to invoke the provisions of the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1936 and come to the aid of the Egyptians. Ben-Gurion orders Israel out of the Sinai. Britain nonetheless sends in Spitfires with the result that 5 are destroyed, 4 in aerial combat and 1 on the ground. The crisis blows over when the US criticizes Britain, not Israel. Although allocated to Israel in the UN partition plan, the Negev is still not wholly under Israeli control. To achieve this, Israel launches Operation Uvda. Avoiding engaging Jordanian positions so as not to violate the ceasefire, Israel sends 2 brigades, the Golani and the Negev, in a race to the Red Sea. The Negev Brigade is the first to reach what will become Israel's port of Eilat. Israeli control of the Negev is now unquestioned. The War of Independence is over. Armistice agreements are signed with Egypt in February 1949, Lebanon in March, and Jordan in April. Syria is last on July 20. The boundaries created by these agreements establish the so-called Green Line. The victory is bittersweet. Fully 1% of Israel's population is killed in the war. Yet, against seemingly impossible odds, the state has been forged. The Zionist movement's goal is realized. After 2,000 years, the Jews are once again a sovereign people in their own land.